Now, does anybody here use Windows and hate those cryptic error messages you get? Okay. Well, one company has decided to do something about it. Now, I don't know if you've seen those new Sony Vaios. They're just 1 inch thick, only 3 pounds. They're really cool notebooks. Well, Sony has decided to rewrite all their error messages. Now, because they're a Japanese company, they've decided to do them in haiku. So these are the error messages you could expect if you get a new Sony Vaio. If I can just find it. There we go. A file that big. It must be very useful, but now it is gone. Yesterday it worked. Today it is not working. Windows is like that. 3 things are certain: death, taxes, and lost data. Guess which has occurred? Chaos reigns within. Reflect, repent, reboot. Order shall return. So we're going to have some fun today. We're going to be looking at this material, which is called Blindsided, from a new book. And everyone will get a copy as long as you hand in your evaluation of today's session. So a free 20-pound book, compliments of BT, and I'll be happy to sign them during as you're leaving the event. I really want to start by asking this question: can an organization appear to be healthy and yet actually be dead? So could you go to some organization, measure all the vital signs, and have the business apparently be healthy, and yet could the business actually be dead? And to answer that question, think about when you learn to drive. When I learned to drive, I was taught to keep 10 feet of distance for every 10 miles an hour from the car in front of me, so that at 60 miles an hour, I'd have 60 feet of distance from the vehicle in front of me. Imagine a driver on the motorway at 60 miles an hour, but all of a sudden a fog descends so the driver can only see 10 feet out in front. If at that very moment you were to measure the vital signs of both the driver and the car, you'd find both were healthy. But I argue they're technically dead. They just may or may not know it yet. And really, it's a metaphor for our organizations today. We used to have stable markets, predictable customers. We used to have 5- and 10-year strategic plans. But now, all that is changing. Now, if you are actually driving at 60 miles an hour with 10 feet of visibility, there are 2 things you can do. One is slow down to 10 miles an hour. But can we slow down in our companies? The other thing you can do is, if you can somehow increase your recognition and response to change 6-fold, you can safely drive with only 10 feet of visibility. So the key is, for organizations today, how do we increase the rate at which we recognize and respond to change? Now, Blindsided affects all organizations. Think about how Polaroid in 2001 filed for bankruptcy. The company that came to define what instant photography was blindsided by the rapid rise of digital photography. Or I love to talk about how an 18-year-old has decimated the profitability of a $40 billion industry. Sean Fanning, by releasing Napster, has changed forever the way music will be distributed. Now, some people will say, well, the music industry killed Napster in court. And yes, they actually did. But I would challenge you to remember your Greek mythology. The myth of the Hydra is, when you cut off the Hydra's head, 6 new heads spring up. And the day after Napster died in court, 90 new file-sharing services sprung up. And over the next 6 months, they consolidated. And 6 months after Napster died, the top 4 file-sharing services were facilitating more file transfers than Napster had at its peak. And it's settled in at about 3 billion files a month are being changed across the internet. In fact, the recording industry this year estimates that they're going to lose $4.5 billion due to file sharing. When an 18-year-old can decimate the profitability of your industry by $4.5 billion, something is happening. So we're going to be looking at questions today, such as, why are organizations being blindsided? What are the laws that guarantee this phenomenon will accelerate? How can we identify early warning signs? How can we prevent ourselves and our industries from being blindsided? And then, as in many of the martial arts, what we learn defensively can also be used offensively. So knowing all these principles, how could we blindside our competition? So that's what we'll be focusing on today. One of the reasons organizations are being blindsided is the rate of change. Here's how long it took for different technologies to reach 1/4 of the North American households. It took electricity 46 years, the car 44, phone 35, TV 26, PC 15, cell phone 13, the web less than 7 years. And once the web is in place, it becomes the digital infrastructure which allows something I call flash pointing to occur. And we'll talk about this later. Another way to look at this is, how long did it take for different technologies to reach their 10 millionth customer? Well, it took radio 20 years, 240 months. It took TV 10 years. It took Netscape 28 months. It took Hotmail 18 months. And it took Napster only 9 months. This is the phenomena of flash pointing. Once the web is in place, changes within an industry can occur actually very quickly. Now, someone here might say to me, Jim, the examples you've used so far deal with technology. Does the phenomena of blindsiding affect all organizations? For the first time in 50 years, sales of chocolate bars fell here in the UK. And who was the culprit? What did it to the chocolate bar makers? Was it the sweet makers? No, their sales fell too. Was it the crisp makers? No. What was it? Well, kids today, the rage is SMS, where you send short text messages to your friends on your mobile. Kids as young as 8 and 9 own cell phones today, and they send emails to their friends on their mobiles. And kids have limited discretionary income, so they're choosing to buy a £5 top-up pay-as-you-go card for their mobile rather than buying a Kit Kat or a Mars bar. Now, if you and I were executives in the strategic planning session for the chocolate bar makers, you think we'd be looking at the cell phone companies as our competitors? No. You see, the chocolate bar makers were blindsided.